Hello and welcome to Gazzetta Football Korea, your beginner's guide podcast all about South Korean football. I'm Martin Jones. Welcome to episode 1. Yeah, this is our first ever podcast. How about that? So what exactly are we doing here? Well, we'll be exploring South Korean football. In particular, we'll be following KLeague 1, which is the top division. So this is a kind of KLeague 101, if you like. Perfect if you don't know anything about Korean football, which is definitely the boat I'm in. So I'll be asking a lot of newbie questions as we go through. Today is a bit of an introductory pod. We'll be looking at why you should be following the KLeague, which players to look out for, and we'll have a bit of team chat as well. And we'll be following this up with podcasts throughout the league season in Korea. With me today are Yumi and Tom Clark. Yumi is a London-based Korean football journalist who writes for the Korean daily national newspaper Dong Ilbo. Her main role is covering Korean players based in the UK, in particular Son Heung-min, as you can imagine. But with no start date for the Premier League, her concentration now turns to her home country and the upcoming league season. Hello, Yumi, or should I say, 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. Hi, everyone.
Good stuff. Also with us today is Tom Clark. Tom is a freelance sports writer who has recently returned to England after spending 10 years in Korea writing about Korean football. He followed the national team at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, covering all the games and writing about them for a Korean magazine. All right, Tom.
Hello, mate. Nice to be here, and I hope to share my enthusiasm for KLeague and get a few new followers coming in.
Excellent. Brilliant. Right, let's crack on. So let's start with the basic question of why should I watch KLeague? Why should the listener watch KLeague, get involved with KLeague?
Well, I'm going to go it's an exciting league. You know, it's competitive. There could be any one of 3 or 4 teams who could end up champions. Last season was brilliant. There's a great finish to it, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. It's on at a good time for England. The first game's on Friday, and that's an 11 a.m. kickoff here. So, you know, what more could you want? Wake up, have a cup of tea, full English breakfast, watch some football. But what about you, Yumi?
I think the K-League is really interesting. I think it's quite underrated compared to like the Chinese Super League, Japanese League. If you look closely, like the relegation battle is always interesting. The promotion battle from the K2 is always exciting, and who's going to be ending up champions as well. So I hope we get a lot more viewers for the K-League as well.
Good stuff. And just looking at this from a newbie perspective, you've only got 12 teams in the league, right? Haven't you? So it looks like it's quite easy to get to grips with, especially because a lot of these names won't be familiar to a European audience. Brilliant. So we're recording this on 3rd of May 2020. So why are we talking about Korean football right now?
Well, I mean, obviously there's not much football going on around the world, and Korea has been pretty good with their reaction to the whole coronavirus pandemic. And it starts up again on May 8th, which is Friday here. And, you know, the league is going to be behind closed doors to start off with, but there will be some live football to follow when, you know, there's not much else to watch at the minute.
So how can people in the UK watch it? Is it going to be shown live? Are there any highlights packages available? How can we stay on top of it?
Well, unless you're lucky enough like Yumi to have Korean channels in your home, it's not entirely sure yet. I spoke earlier in the week with Sports Radar, which are the company that have the international media broadcasting rights, and they have said they're in conversation with lots of European broadcasters about showing the games over here, and ESPN in the United States. Failing that, there is the KLeague YouTube channel, which has weekly highlights of every game, and you could even learn a little bit of Korean listening to the commentators. But Yumi, how do you follow it? How have you followed it before?
Yeah, because I live in the Korean community in the UK, so there are some companies who have a Korean setup box, so you can watch live TV like in Korea. The good thing about the KLeague this season is they're going to start off by showing all the live games for free. Some were actually prepaid in Korea, but because it's behind closed doors and because of the coronavirus pandemic, they're going to be showing all the games for free. So if you do any Koreans or I don't know English people around the area who have the Korean set-top box, because there are like Korean movies on there as well. So if you do have that, then we can watch the games for free live.
So all round to yours, basically, to watch that. Excellent. So let's get into the league itself and break that down a bit. I mentioned there are 12 teams. Can you just talk about how the league works, what the format is of the KLeague?
So, like you say, there are 12 teams, and the league has been curtailed slightly this season, so it's not going to be as long as it has been in previous years, but that still means every team play each other once, home and away. And then once you get to that point, after they've all played each other twice, the league splits into two, kind of like the Scottish Premier League, where you get the top six and then the bottom six. And this year, instead of playing each other, this season, they're going to be playing that top six, that mini league will play each other once. So the teams who finish first, second and third in the regular season, they get the benefit of one extra home game, and the same for the teams in 7th, 8th, 9th. So once you get to the halfway point, it then becomes very competitive into these two mini leagues, and that is how the Asian Champions League placings are decided. And for the bottom half, that is where the relegation issues come in. And it's a slightly different format this year with the relegation, because one of the teams, Sangju Sangmu, is a military team, and they have already been confined to relegation to K2 for the next season. So if they finish bottom of the league, then the team in 11th, they get automatically relegated. But if Sangju finish if anywhere other than bottom, then the other team who would be relegated go into a relegation playoff match against the playoff winners of K2, if you understand where I'm coming from there.
Very good. You mentioned the Asian Champions League. Can you talk a bit more about that? How many countries are involved in this, and probably more importantly, how many teams go through from KLeague 1 into the Asian Champions League?
So from KLeague 1, it is the top 3 teams, and the FA Cup winners get the 4th spot. So Suwon, who didn't have a particularly good season last year, they are still in the Champions League because they were the FA Cup winners. So that's how they go into it. As for the overall numbers, I'm not sure, because it is a big continent with a lot of teams, but it is split into an East-West conference, so with Korea, Japan, and even down into Australia and China making up the east side, and then the Western Asian countries like Uzbekistan, they play in that side of it. Korea has had some recent success in the Asian Champions League. Jeongbuk won it in 2016, and Pohang are the joint highest winners ever, with 3 titles to their name. And yeah, so it's exciting. And the first game for the Asian Champions Leagues, they did take place before the COVID pandemic became a pandemic, and that had to go on hold. So that will be picking up later on because there's issues with travel.
Okay, so it's still very much a big deal getting into the Champions League. So it's a bit like how we look at it in the English Premier League, where the teams are all trying to get into those Champions League spots. It's pretty similar for the K-League teams as well. That's the prestigious tournament they all want to get into.
Yeah, very much so. Like coming third is, like we have our 4th place trophy here for the likes of Spurs and Arsenal. It's the same in Korea. You get in top 3, you get in Champions League, and that's a big deal. And there's money. That's where a lot of the money comes from too.
Yeah, ticket sales are usually higher in the Asian Champions League games as well, and than the league. There's a lot of interest from Korean fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just before the Champions League stopped, Andres Iniesta's Japanese team was playing in Korea, and despite coronavirus being known about and being a thing, there was still a decent crowd turned up to watch that, just because you get a chance to watch Iniesta play in Korea. That's exciting. I mean, get to watch Iniesta play anywhere in the world is fun. And one of the Australian teams was playing, and their fans didn't make it because of coronavirus. But when the Australian teams do, they bring travelling fans, which is on the same time zone to Western Australia from Perth to Korea, but it's still a long flight. That's a hell of an away trip. The European fans here, Arsenal and Chelsea, complained about having to go to Baku. It's pretty much that, coming up from Sydney to Seoul.
We've touched a little bit on coronavirus situation. I mean, we're still in lockdown in the UK, no sporting events. Lots of leagues tie themselves in knots figuring out if they can restart, how they're going to go about doing that. What does the situation look like in South Korea just at the moment?
It's a lot better now in South Korea. They've really tackled it well with the testing, because probably a few months ago we were second to China with the rates, but they completely locked that out. They locked down Daegu, which is a town where the majority of the cases were based. They locked down that town, and it really helped. I think today there were only 13 new cases, and that was the highest that we've had for the past week. So it's mostly in like the 5 to 10 kind of range, which is a lot lower than some of the other countries. So they've really done well.
Yeah, I mean, like to just add a little bit more to what Yumi said, the city Daegu, which was the epicenter of the outbreak in Korea, their KLeague team are playing in the league. That's how quickly and how well it's been dealt with there. That the city, which was outside of Wuhan at the time, was the biggest outbreak anywhere in the world, is now hosting football matches, or will be next week. And all the players have and staff and managers and coaches and medical teams, everybody passed their coronavirus tests on Friday. And Yumi, I think you were saying there's going to be some match day tests as well. There's more protocol that they have to go through.
Yeah, they were very careful about starting the league because they didn't want any other kind of problems arising. So that all the games are going to be started behind closed doors, so no fans are going to be able to go in. But before the teams go into the stadium, all the managers, the coaches, the staff from every club and the players have to go through a three-way testing before they go into the stadium. I think it's like a temperature test and other tests before they're actually allowed into the stadium. So just to make sure, take precautions.
Yeah. And if anybody does fail the test, then not just that player, but I believe it's the entire team go into a quarantine as well, don't they? And because one of the reasons that it's such a good time to get into K-League is because this is not the resumption of a season. This is the start of a new season, and so the league are able to put rules in place now for if somebody does test positive, well, then we know what's going to happen. It's going to be a 2-week quarantine. The match is going to start. And if it's on the match day, then I think the entire league stops for 2 weeks, and then the matches will be rescheduled. And what's been put in place is if there is a second wave outbreak and the whole league has to stop, then if there have been 22 matches, we've got to game week 22, if that's been completed, then that is the final table. The champions are the team at the top. The relegated team is Sangju, and whoever else is bottom. If we haven't reached the 22 game mark, then the league will be cancelled, and the Champions League places, I believe, they will go to the teams who are currently in it this season, and the records will actually be scrapped, other than the goal scoring records. So even if the league's voided, if you've had a blistering start and scored 10 goals, they still go to your all-time record. And match day rules, like Yumi was saying, there's all the different temperature checks and the 3 stages you have to pass. There's actually some rules for the players that they're not allowed to spit on the pitch, and they're not allowed to talk is one that has, it just can't work, surely. Like, how can you have football players?
No handshake for the match.
Yeah, the managers are allowed to shout and talk because they're on the sideline wearing masks in their box. But I don't know. I don't get it how a centre back can not be organising his defence. How the goalkeeper can't shout to his fullback to tuck in. I can't see that working.
We'll see what happens.
So it sounds like it could lead to some pretty chaotic defending then in the first few weeks. Maybe a system of hand signals or gestures. I don't know. But just going back to the fans, what kind of attendances do we normally see in KLeague? Just as kind of a rough figure.
It kind of depends what area you're in. Some towns the football isn't that popular, so you probably get at best like 1,000. But we've got clubs like the capital in Seoul, the big town in Suwon, or the champions like Jeonbuk. They'll get 10,000, 20,000. So it all depends. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, baseball for attendance is a very popular sport in Korea, and so FC Seoul, they have a lot of competition with the baseball fans going out. There's a couple of baseball teams in the same city as them, but also for FC Seoul, they play in this ginormous stadium, the World Cup Stadium, which was built for 2002, and a lot of the clubs do play in these 60,000, 50, 60,000 seater stadiums, and that doesn't help. But then there are other clubs who now play in a football specific stadium, like Incheon have got this beautiful new stadium, whereas before they were playing with an athletics track in this huge stadium that you might get 5,000 or 6,000 people in, but that's nothing when it seats 40,000. But you get 5,000 or 6,000 people in a 10,000 seater stadium, you've suddenly got an atmosphere. And it's the same with Pohang Steelers, the Steel Yard. Great, it's a great stadium, it's compact, it's right on the pitch, and they sell out. And that just makes for a cracking atmosphere down there. And the more teams that get out of the World Cup stadiums, the better, in my opinion. And I think 3 of them have done for this season. So I think it's a good thing for the league, actually. It's 60,000 seats with 10,000 people in. That's not great. 10,000 in a 12,000 stadium, brilliant.
I was actually lucky enough to go to the first opening match at the new Incheon Stadium. I think it was back in 2012, 2011, but it was a really big thing. Like beforehand, when they had matches, they played in the baseball stadium, and it was huge. And not many people go to see football. It's not a very popular sport in Incheon. But once they built this new stadium, it was kind of based around like the European kind of football stadiums, and it was a really big thing, and it completely sold out. And tickets, it was really hard to get tickets, so one of my friends had to pay 10 times the amount just for that opening game. So wow. I can still remember the buzz around that.
Yeah, I my first Incheon game was actually at the old stadium, and this was before I could read Korean. And so me and a couple of friends, we travelled from Ujeongbu, which is about an hour and a half, on a Saturday morning to get to the stadium. And then when we got out the subway, we thought, this is really quiet, there's nobody around. And we walked up to the stadium and we got there, and the game was on the Sunday, not the Saturday. So it was a completely wasted journey. But we just thought, well, we'll have a look around the stadium, we'll see what's going on. And there was no security guards, and the gate was unlocked. So we just walked into the stadium, and we were down in the bowels of the stadium. The changing rooms were unlocked. The very empty trophy room, as we'll talk about with Incheon later, was unlocked with, I don't know, a runners-up trophy or 2, nothing that they'd won anything. But we just went out onto the pitch. We had a race around the athletics track, and we did go back the following day for the KLeague game. And the atmosphere just wasn't there. You had this pocket of fans, a couple of thousand behind the goal, making a great atmosphere, but then this empty bowl of a stadium, and it just wasn't the same. But like Yumi says, they've gone to a football specific stadium, and it's brilliant. It's all the better for it.
We mentioned a couple of teams there. Which are the teams that we should be looking out for in this forthcoming KLeague 1 season?
I think, as always, Jeonbuk is the biggest team in Korea at the moment, the most attendance. So I think they've got all the stars in there. People compare it to like the KLeague All-Star team in that one team. So they're definitely going to be the team to look out for.
Yeah, so Jeonbuk are the 3-time champions at the minute. They've won 6 of the last 7. They're definitely the team to beat. The one year that they didn't win the KLeague was when they won the Champions League. They don't have they have they're an old team, but they don't have the history of winning of some of the other teams who were more successful, like Songnam, who are now a mid-table K1 team. But they won 7 league titles, but that was back in the beginning part of this century and in the 80s and 90s. But say Jeonbuk are definitely the team to beat, but I think Ulsan will give them a run this season. And Ulsan were so, I want to say unlucky, but I don't think unlucky is the word, because they threw it away. They didn't win the league last season, and it was in their hands, and they actually lost it on not goal difference, on goals scored, and they lost it by 1 goal when they went in with 2 games to go. They played Jeonbuk in the penultimate game, and they drew 1-1, that's fine. It was away. It's a decent result. But they had a home game against Pohang Steelers, and Pohang Steelers are their proper rivals. The East Coast Derby, they call it in Korea. And they lost 4-1 at home, including I think it was about the 87th, 88th minute. The Ulsan goalkeeper decided to take a throw-in, and he threw it directly to the Pohang striker, who tapped into an empty net. And you could just see there was no chance of them. There's 5 minutes of injury time. Absolutely no chance of them getting a goal back. Their heads were gone. And but if they can get some wins straight at the beginning of the season, then they can kind of forget about that. And I think Ulsan will be good this season. And FC Seoul are coming back into it. I think now they've had a few years. 2018 they were in the relegation playoff game, which is absolutely nuts for a team that size to be anywhere near relegation. But I think they've got a good shout. So there could be a 3-way title battle. And if Pohang play to the best of their abilities, it could even be a 4th team in there.
Yeah, Yumi, I think we touched on earlier. You're an Incheon fan. Where is Incheon based? What can you tell us about Incheon?
So Incheon is where the airport, when you go into Korea, that's where the main international airport is. We were automatically based for where I was working. We were automatically placed in the town, and it happened to be Incheon. It's about two hours from Seoul, probably. So it's because it's the international hub for Korea. It's quite a busy town. Yeah.
And do you fancy their chances this year? Are they going to do much?
I mean, they never going to win the title or anything. And I think it's going to be another relegation battle again. It seems like every season they're talking about relegation. I mean, they're really not a rich team, and especially the manager Yu Sang-chul, he was battling cancer last season. So I think everyone was rooting for Incheon to avoid relegation just to support the manager, because I think he's was struggling. Even during the cancer battle, he still came to the games and really cheered the team on, and I think everyone was kind of touched with that. He's now in hospital getting treatment, but hopefully he'll battle through.
Definitely. So who are your big rivals?
FC Seoul was always the team to beat, because they were like the it team, the hottest team, and because it's probably the closest kind of rival team there is to Incheon. It's not central to Korea, so probably FC Seoul, I would say.
Yeah, one thing with Incheon is, because they never challenge for the title and they are always in these relegation battles, they see themselves as having a derby with FC Seoul and with Suwon Blue Wings as well. But to Suwon and FC Seoul,
teams don't really care.
Yeah, Incheon don't matter to them, because they're not they're not a challenge. They're not a rival. And unfortunately for Yumi, Incheon are often the butt of Korean football jokes. They are, I mean, how they always stay up, we don't know, but they always do. But I mean, if you're looking for a team to support and you like that roller coaster of emotions, one week, winning, the next week throwing away a 3-goal lead, they are your team. You will always find entertainment in Incheon.
They're the team of inconsistency.
Absolutely.
Inconsistent Incheon. So it trips off the tongue quite nicely. Now, I don't have a team. Tom, do you have a team?
I'm torn, actually. One of the things I loved about going to football in Korea was that I could go reasonably neutral, and I'd often like the underdog to win or go in with the away fans because they can make some good atmosphere. I say Incheon was my first game. I lived in Songnam for a while, and I went to a lot of Songnam games. So probably if I had to choose one, it would be Songnam, and they are traditionally one of the most successful teams, but not in more recent years. It's a stadium with an athletics track, but they have this temporary stand they put up behind the goal. So you get all the hardcore fans all in together, making a good atmosphere. And then there's one bit I love, and it looks cooler than it sounds. They have a ginormous robotic magpie appear from behind the stadium, flapping its wings with noise and smoke and lasers, and it makes for a great atmosphere. So I got a lot of time for them, but being a Spurs fan, I sympathise with Ulsan a lot. I really, really do. They are very much like the Spurs of Korea. So I've got a lot of sympathy for them. But Songnam probably is where they're the team I look for their result first.
Okay, so if you're somebody listening who like me doesn't have a team, what tips can you give us? How do we find a team?
Don't support Jeonbuk.
Or Incheon.
Don't Jeonbuk just win too much. That's not fun. Nobody new to the Premier League should support Man City. So nobody new to the KLeague should support Jeonbuk. Go for someone different. Check out our Twitter, which we will give you out later at Gazzetta Football Korea, and there will be an article link there where you can compare your Premier League team to a Korean side, and also just a little game where you can just do a spinning wheel, a wheel of fortune type thing to find out who you should support. But I'll quickly run through a couple that I've written up there. And Pohang, for me, are very, very much the Liverpool of Korea, because let's not forget that Liverpool haven't won the Premier League yet, and they haven't won it for 30 years. Pohang haven't won K-League for a long time, but they are the most successful team in continental competitions, like Liverpool are for us here. Port City as well, and a very tight, raucous stadium, playing red as well, so that helps.
They have a great history as well, I heard.
Yeah, absolutely. They do. They're one of the traditional teams, and they got a lovely, good team to get behind. If you do want roller coasters, if you do want to watch a game and not know what's going to happen, it's got to be Incheon. Yumi might be telling you not to, but if that's what you like, highs and lows, Incheon are your team.
It's going to be a roller coaster supporting Incheon, definitely.
And FC Seoul are very much the team that people love to hate. They've moved. They're not always been based in Seoul. They play in a big stadium. They are, despite not having the most successful history, they're probably the most recognizable name, just because it's the name of the capital city. People in China and Japan, they all know about Seoul. They know where it is. People don't know where Gwangju or Gangwon or Ulsan are, but everybody knows where Seoul is. It's this big, buzzing, cool metropolis, and so FC Seoul do have that, that gravitas for people, but not for me.
FC Seoul, no one likes us. We don't care.
Very much so.
You could say. So as we said earlier, you've got 12 teams. I've just got a table in front of me. You've got Seongnam, you've got Pohang Steelers, Suwon Blue Wings, Ulsan Hyundai, Sangju Sangmu, which I want to come back to in a second, Jeonbuk, Incheon, Daegu, Gangwon, and we've got Gwangju, we've got Busan iPark, and FC Seoul. Tom, you mentioned Sangju, Sangmu are the military team. What on earth is that all about?
So all able-bodied Korean men have to do a 20-month military service. And there are exceptions to this, as Yumi will probably be able to best tell you about Sun Hyun-min, because he's doing his 3-week one because he won the gold medal at the Asian Games. So you do get exceptions if you have won medals at the Olympics or Asian Games. But if you haven't, if you're a solid KLeague player who doesn't play internationally and hasn't got that exception, you still have to do your military service. But how it's set up is that so that they can carry on with their career, they all go to one football club, and that's Sangju Sangmu, and they do their military service by playing for this team. They don't get their regular wage they would do from their team. They get the living wage that you would get as a member of the military. So that means that you get 23 players, and they're different ages because some people put their military service off until their later 20s. So it's not just like a youth team, it's of all ages. But it also means the turnover for this side, every year people's military service comes to an end. So I think this winter, 17 players from last season have gone and 16 new players have come in. And they're all players who are on loan from other K-League teams. So you've got 2 guys coming in from Jeongbuk. They've just won the K-League last season, and instead of playing in the Champions League, they're now playing for Sangju Sangmu, and they have got relegation already for, that's already going to happen this year. So maybe that could lead to the team just being free and just, it doesn't matter what they do, they're going to get relegated. So just go out and have some fun. Or maybe there's no motivation whatsoever. It'd be interesting to see. But maybe Yumi, you could talk a little bit more about the military service, because we're talking about Sun Hyun-min there, who you know very well.
Yeah, so for players to get exemption completely for the military, you either have to get, I think, at least a bronze in the Olympics, gold in the World Cup, which is not going to happen, or like Son Heung-min and the players at that time, the Asian Games, gold in the Asian Games. So he got exemption, but they still have to do 4 weeks. Like a basic training kind of program, so they still have to do that at some time. So and I heard Sangju Sangmu, they have a limit of the amount of players that they can bring in each year as well. So some of the players who are playing in the K-League sometimes can't get into Sangju Sangmu either, so they actually have to stop playing their football for 20 months and actually apply for a different department, which is unfortunate, but it's a system that they have to look into.
And Yumi, have you spoken to Sun this year about his military service? Has that ever come up in your conversations with him?
Yeah, so basically that's one of the areas that we're not actually allowed to ask about in detail. Like before the exemption, talk about the military service, and something that we don't ask him, and he's not going to answer us anyway. So it's just one of those things. But even before all this happened, we asked him about the 4-week kind of training. When's that going to happen? And he would just be like, we don't know. That's always the topic that he's not really willing to go into detail about, because it's such a big topic in Korea. So he didn't want to make a big fuss about it. So we just never know.
That's really fascinating, and we'll have to come back to that at another time in future, I think. Question now for myself, really. You guys have got K-League teams. I don't. I've narrowed it down to 2 teams, and I need you to help me out here in terms of picking a team. On one hand, we've got Pohang Steelers. I like quite a bit of what you've said about them so far. Like Tom, I'm also a Tottenham fan. And then Ulsan being the K-League equivalent of Tottenham, that's quite appealing as well. So I'm picking between those 2 teams. I've already checked out the kits. Kits are both pretty nice for those 2 teams. So yeah, help me out here. what are the pros and cons of those two teams? Who should I be following in K-League 1 this year?
I think everyone has a soft spot for Ulsan just because they're always so close to everything, but never get to that top spot. So they might be very interesting. But Pohang as well has a huge history, and they're one of the most traditional teams. A lot of legendary players have been through Pohang. So very interesting teams to support, definitely.
Yeah, you've narrowed it down to two good ones there, and two teams that I do like. I like watching them as well. As we've said a few times, Ulsan are always the bridesmaids. I think that saying was made for them. They are always the bridesmaids, never the bride. So if you like a bit of heartache, if you don't mind getting close and having your heart broken, then go with them. But like Yumi said, Pohang are this traditional powerhouse, and it might be the time for them to come back. Realistically, maybe a Champions League spot is what they're looking at rather than a championship. But it's a curtailed season, so you don't know. And like you mentioned, the kits. I do have the kit guide coming out next week that you will all be able to take a look at, and they are my top two. I won't tell you in which order they are. I'll let you know that they are the top two though. Pohang have this red and black. It's hooped stripes rather than vertical, and it is a little bit rugby-esque. But when I look at it, and I think Flamengo, that Brazilian club, is a lovely kit, and it's got a collar. Kits with collars always work for me. And Ulsan is a vertical navy and lighter blue striped one with lots of details, and then a lovely away kit as well. Pohang have the steel yard, a very compact stadium. Ulsan play in the World Cup stadium, but they do it well. And if you look on our Twitter page, it is actually the banner picture. It's got these two tigers and coming down the stadium, and it looks very cool. So it's your choice, but who are you going to pick, Mark?
I'm thinking Pohang. I'm thinking probably getting enough Spursiness from Spurs. I think that's maybe too much Spursiness following two versions of Spurs. I've got the Pohang kit in front of me. Yeah, it does look great. I mean, I'm a big rugby fan as well as a football fan. So the fact it does have a bit of a rugby vibe, the kit looks great. The second and third kits, I've got those in front of me as well. There's a very much an Olympic Marseille theme with the second kit and third kit. So the second kit is it's darker than sky blue, but it's all blue, but again with that same white collar. And then the third kit is just the reverse of the second kit, so it's a white kit with kind of blue detailing. Pohang Steelers it is then. Very good. Yeah, so if you want to go through that same process yourself, find yourself a K-League team, get onto Twitter. We're at Gazzetta Korea. That's the Italian word Gazzetta, so that's 2 Z's and 2 T's. But yeah, we'll mention that again at the end of the show. Brilliant. So those are the teams. Let's stick a pin in the teams and let's move on to the most important people, the players. Who are the big players in K-League 1 this season? Who should we be looking out for?
I'm definitely going to let Yumi go first on this one, because some of them are friends, are well known to her, aren't they, from their time in England?
Yeah, I know a couple of the players just because from when they were playing in the UK. So Lee Chong-young was probably the first kind of player I was sent to cover up every week from my newspaper when he was up in Bolton. So he's at Ulsan now, so there's a huge buzz around that. Everyone was looking forward to Ki Sung-young and Lee Chong-young. They're from the FC Seoul Academy, but they've been in Europe for ages now, and it's the first time Lee Chong-young is back in the K-League, so there's a huge buzz around that, that he's gone to Ulsan, so he's one to look out for. I know Kim Bo-kyung at Jeonbuk. He was at Ulsan, and then he moved back to Jeonbuk, where he was at a few years ago as well. So he played at Cardiff. So he's a player I know well.
And Kimbo Hyung, this is the reigning player of the year, isn't he? He's the MVP, as they say in Korea. So he's leaving the runners-up to go back to the champions, who he was only on loan from. But yeah, reigning player of the year, and he had a decent career with Cardiff. Didn't quite cut it at Premier League level, would you say? Maybe he was a Championship level.
He really tried hard. I had to look up, find out some stuff for him as well, but he really tried hard to stay in the Premier League because he loved his life here so much. And he really wanted to prove himself over after Cardiff, but he just couldn't get that visa. That's always the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's actually, to get a little bit serious, the visa issue is something that might change with Brexit. It might become easier for the Korean players to get visas. So we might see more playing in England. There's quite a lot in Germany, and it's possible that we'll see more Koreans over here. So this could be with not much else going on, they could really be in the shop window here.
So just to stay on that tangent for a moment longer, how do the South Korean players tend to settle in the UK? I mean, do they? I guess it's probably going to be quite an individual thing, but do they generally find it quite easy or difficult, or
they all go to
a general theme?
They all go to Yumi's parents' restaurant for their Korean food. If you ever go in there, it's just wall-to-wall pictures of Korean football players.
It all started with Seo Gi-hyun after the 2002 World Cup when he came to Wolverhampton. He was the first Korean player in the Premier League, and he was a huge star here. And basically, his wife was pregnant at the time, and she couldn't eat anything without gagging except my mum's food. So he came every weekend after a Wolverhampton game, like 2.5 hours that drive down here, and she would get all the food that she craved. So after him, he started introducing our restaurant to all these Korean players who came over. So probably except Park Ji-sung at Manchester United, every single Korean player that's played in England has at least once come to our restaurant. Some of them are regulars. So that's where it started, really.
And Ki Sung-young was up at Newcastle, and I think also Sunderland, wasn't he, for a bit? So that's a long old journey. So if 2.5 hours is bad from Wolverhampton. So,
he was actually supposed to go to the KLeague as well this season. It was him and Lee Chung-young both wanted to go back to their home country and give something to the fans because they're nearing the retirement age. So they wanted really just to go back and just to give back something to the Korean fans, but something didn't go right with FC Seoul, which is his parent club, and he had to go to Spain, Mallorca.
Key's move was an odd one because it looked like he was going to be going to Jeonbuk, the champions, to join them, but because, as Yumi said, he was a graduate of the FC Seoul Academy. If he was to play again in Korea, then FC Seoul would get a portion of the transfer fee, and that made it too expensive for Jeonbuk to spend that money on, and they would have been directly funding a rival in doing so as well. And so just another reason to dislike FC Seoul. They stopped the Korean captain, the man with over 100 caps for his country, coming back and finishing his career in his hometown.
He's known to be very outspoken. He's a very honest and outspoken character in Korea, and he gets a lot of attention. But some of the stuff he said after the move fell through was quite, strong. So I think everyone knows FC Seoul kind of blocked a huge superstar coming back to Korea, and it would have been really great for the league as well in general. So it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, as we say, they're the team that everyone loves to hate, and they just keep adding fuel to the fire.
You mentioned the Seoul Academy. That just sounds like some kind of TV talent show.
The Seoul Academy is actually really well known in Korea. It's probably like the West Ham Academy over here. A lot of great players have come through that club. So that's what Seoul does well.
Excellent. So we've discussed Lee Chung-young, someone to look out for, Kimbo Hyung. What about foreign players? Do you get many foreign players in KLeague 1, do you have any limits? Where did the foreign players tend to come from?
So you are allowed 3 foreign players per team, and a fourth if that fourth comes from an ASEAN country, which is Southeast Asia. So think Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, those kind of countries. And that's new for this season, is that fourth player. And actually not many clubs are taking advantage of it yet, but it could be. Where they come from, you get Brazilians. Obviously, you get Brazilians everywhere in the world. And Uzbekistan players, actually, there's quite a few, because Uzbekistan have got a good youth setup, and their youth teams have done very well in the international competitions, and they're breaking into the main squad now. So you get some Uzbekis, but then also some Russians, some Serbians, Montenegrins, so probably for me, and Australians as well. There's a couple of Australians now. Like Adam Taggart is playing at Suwon, and he was the league's top scorer last year with 20 goals in 32 games. So pretty good. And most of the foreign players that come in are attacking players in general. 2 new ones this season probably to look out for are both 6'5", target men strikers. One is Bjorn Johnson, who is a Norwegian international. They signed him, Ulsan have signed him from AZ Alkmaar in the Netherlands, and similar player to him, say 6'5", big, strong target man, is Lars Veldvik, who is a South African international, but he's a Dutch-born South African international. And he's going into Jeonbuk to spearhead their attack. He was playing at Sparta Rotterdam before his move to Korea. Of the Brazilians, Adriano is returning to FC Seoul after a season in China and 2 seasons at Jeonbuk. Again, a forward player, typical Brazilian flair. And Felipe is another Brazilian who I think is probably looking out for. Again, big, strong striker. He was the top scorer in KLeague 2, and he's got promoted with Gwangju, and he's still with them. But one other international player, sorry to go on a bit long on this, but is Alexander Pesic at FC Seoul. Now, he was due to leave the club this winter, but because there are no other leagues running, his move didn't go through. And so he's ended up staying at FC Seoul, which is a real coup for the club, because he's a good player. I'll tweet the clip of one of the goals he scored last year. It's an absolute beautiful goal. And if he stays in the K-League, if other leagues don't start running, then FC Seoul have really, really lucked out on that.
I remember last season a player that's known over here from Cardiff and QPR, Jordan Much, also went to Gyeongnam. I thought that was very interesting, and it didn't go out as planned, and they had to end the contract by mutual consent, I think, early. But it was there was a huge buzz just because he was a Premier League British player going into random club like Gyeongnam. It was very interesting.
Yeah, of all the teams to choose, Gyeongnam is
not even a big team.
Yeah, that's an odd one, that one.
It really was.
Anyone to pick out from my beloved Pohang Steelers?
Well, from Pohang, they've got an Australian new signing this year, is Brandon O'Neill. He's not your typical foreign signing for the K-League. He is a tough tackling central midfielder, adding a bit of bite, which is, you don't really get that in the foreign signing. So that'll be interesting. Got a Russian striker, Stanislav Ilyachenko, if my pronunciation is correct. He joined halfway through last season. Started off okay, 9 goals in 18 games. So that's not too bad, but probably needs to be adding a little bit more to that. And a guy they signed at the same point of last season is a Serbian, another Alexander. This one's Alexander Palosevic, I believe it is. I think that's the Serbian way of saying it, Palosevic. He's a forward-thinking midfielder too. Pohang were 4th last year, so looking to add a bit of steel to the Steelers. Brandon O'Neill.
Very good. I like it. Excellent. Good stuff. We've mentioned the league starts on Friday, 8th of May. Do we have a full set of fixtures? Any games jump out as ones that we need to be across?
Yeah, so the opening game is on the 8th, which is a bank holiday here, so there really is no excuse not to be following it. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff in Korea, which is 11 a.m. in England, and it is the reigning champions Jeonbuk versus Suwon Blue Wings, who are the FA Cup holders. So it's a good game to start the season with. A home game for John, but you'd expect to see a home win there. But, first game of the season, they haven't played for a long time. Okay, these two sides did have Asian Champions League games, but that was back in February, I think it was. And so there's a long time. Probably the other fixture of the first weekend that I would say stands out is your Pohang Steelers, Martin, against Busan. And that is at the Steelyard, which is a bit of a shame because they're not too far apart, those two teams. So Busan would have taken a decent away following, and that would have been a cracking atmosphere. That would have been a sellout for that game. But, it's
Busan
still...
have been promoted, haven't they?
Yeah,
so they'll be up for it.
Absolutely, yeah. They won the relegation playoff match, promotion relegation playoff match, and that always, I think, does favour the promoted, the team in KLeague 2 a little bit, because they go into it in good form, whereas the team coming down into it is, they've generally had 9 months of shocking results. So Busan will be really up for it. Their first game back into K1, but the other games for the first weekend, on Saturday, we've got Ulsan, who are hosting Sangju Sangmu. We have Incheon at home to Daegu, Gwangju at home to Songnam, and on the Sunday, Gangwon at home to FC Seoul. That's the first weekend's fixtures, and we'll go through next weekend's. We can do those next week. But Yumi, what do you reckon? Incheon at home to Daegu, think they can get off to a winning start?
Incheon all the way.
So how can people follow the K-League? What other resources are there out there in terms of English language content, websites, newspapers?
Well, definitely the go-to website for English language content is KLeagueUnited.com. They also do a podcast, which give it a listen after this if you want a little bit more K-League information. And they've been doing one for a little while, and that's more aimed at the K-League fan, the man or woman who's got a team who follows it religiously. So they're really good on that. And so KLeagueUnited.com for lots of us. They've got a very good guide up, actually. So take a look at that. And our host website for this is sportsgazette.co.uk. And that's a gazette with only one Z to confuse things a little bit. But that's where the previews that I have written will be going up over the next few days ahead of the kickoff on Friday. So they're definitely the ones to take a look at. And if you can read Korean, go to Yumi's newspaper.
Yeah, always.
Excellent. I'll just learn Korean by Friday, and then I'll be all set. Yeah, excellent. A lot of great insights there. Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks very much, Yumi. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just give it a go. Like, watch it, and don't watch it and compare it to the Premier League. Just think of it as something completely different. Look, it's not going to be the same level as Premier League football. That's not what you're going to get, but you are going to get competitive games where you don't go into it knowing that Liverpool, for example, they're going to win. They're going to, John do lose games. They might be the best team, but they do lose, and it's fun. It's energetic. It's really fast-paced football. Look, yeah, the skill isn't like watching Liverpool or Man City, but it is a really, really fun league to watch. And you've got nothing to lose by catching a few of the games. And if there isn't any English language commentary, then the Korean commentators really, really go for it. They're very loud, aren't they, Yumi?
They really are. They do that deliberately sometimes. I speak to them a lot as well every week, and they really they ask me like, how can I do it? Like, shall I put more energy into my voice?
More energy? I don't know how they do more energy.
Yeah, because I watch the Korean matches sometimes on my TV as well. So they're like, I think I need more energy in my voice, but it's like their thing. They like to scream, they like to shout, so they like to be loud. But the Korean League itself is really interesting, and over the past few years, I think it's been attracting more viewers and popularity as well within Korea. So yeah, it's a good time to go into Korean football now.
Yeah, and keep an eye on the Twitter, because I will be speaking to Sports Radar again tomorrow to see if there's been any progress made with the TV rights. And as soon as I know, then I will put them out on the Twitter for everybody else to find out as well.
Brilliant. Well, I'm definitely sold. So I'll definitely be following along. Just to recap, the KLeague 2020 season starts on Friday, the 8th of May. Stay subscribed and check in with us as we go through the season. Our Twitter handle is Gazzetta Korea. So that's the Italian spelling of Gazzetta with 2 Z's and 2 T's. You can follow Tom as well on Twitter. He is at _Thomas J. Clark. So that's Clark with no E. And you can follow Yumi as well at Rachel _her. So that's RACHEL_HUR. Brilliant. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our Beginner's Guide podcast on Korean football. It's been fun, and we look forward to catching up with you soon.